Good morning, Yorkshire Classic Cars Limited fans. Just turn the lights off because I don't think we need them. Welcome to another bright, breezy and super sunny day in sunny Retford. It's glorious out there, blowing literally a gale, but all the guttering fell down yesterday again. That's about every 3-day occurrence, so that's fine. And welcome to a job I'm doing on the Spitfire today, which I thought might be of interest. I've done one side, and then I thought, actually, that might be of interest to my viewers. So here we go. So what I'm going to do basically today is show you how to install Freelander wheel studs. Now, the standard wheel stud on a Spitfire is a 3/8 UNF affair, and you can see them here, or you should be able to see them here. 3/8 is roughly equivalent to 10 millimeters. It's a very small stud. These are about the same size as they are the same size as a Mini. But obviously Spitfire is quite a much larger car with quite a lot more power as well. Now, that being said, Spitfires are still very light little cars. They're not a big heavyweight car. If you're going to do this job, it does necessitate you buying Freelander wheel studs, which I have done. These usually come in 5s because Freelanders have 5 stud hubs. So you're probably going to end up with a pair left over like I am. These are the ones. These are an M12 1.5 pitch thread, excuse me, full of cold, which means the other thing you will need is a set of wheel nuts, okay? These are the same wheel nuts, basically, as what the customer had already. They have a 60-degree taper here. Now, you'd have to check your wheels and your wheel nuts for what you're using. I had to replicate these. So these are the... I'll just show you the customer's original wheel nuts. That's the original wheel nut there. And that's the replacement that I bought. Now, these ones I've bought, I have actually specified more taper on here. I like to think that there's more thread in there and that the taper is larger because there's more surface area on it. Makes me feel a little bit safer. However, whether it makes a difference or not, I don't know, but it just makes me feel a little bit comfier. They're not particularly expensive. They're about £20 a set of sort of 16, so they're not big money. Obviously, you only need 12 if you've got locking wheel nuts, which this car has at the front. However, they're still 3/8 UNF, so they need to be changed as well. You cannot use your 3/8 UNF wheel nuts with your new studs. Now, you can see, if you look at that, the size difference, so you can imagine how much stronger those big wheel studs are. Excuse me. So, to fit these, as I say, I've done this side already. When you order the wheel studs, you will also notice that I love when I forget things. So I forgot to walk across with this wheel stud. Hence there'll be a multitude of editing going on. So there's the original wheel stud. This is the metric equivalent out of a Freelander. And as you can see, the part here, let me zoom you in a little bit. The part here is the same size. Now, when I say it's the same size, where the spline is there, well, that's where it locates into the hub. This part is a little bit of a coarser spline, but I will say it's about 0.06 of a millimetre larger. On the grand schemes of things, that doesn't make a world of difference. They pull in perfectly well and they fit perfectly well. These are also stepped up to that size. I have no actual idea why Triumph saw fit to step the studs down quite so profusely like that. However, they did, so that's that. You will also notice that the Freelander stud, not only being thicker and stronger, but it is also quite a bit longer. Now, on some occasions, you may not need to alter this, but what I'm doing for his wheels, I'm going to make these the same length. That makes installation an awful lot easier if that's what you need to do. It means that you can slot them on and off without having to dismantle the entire brake assemblies. So, the first job I'm going to show you today is how to reduce the length. Now, it's about 1/2 inch there I'm taking off. I'm not actually taking that much off, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that now. So, you can probably see I've got my mole grips here. I've got the angle grinder ready. I've got a wheel nut that's the correct thread, so M12 1.5 there. Hoping you can see this, M12 by 1.5 there. These are the wheel studs I've already cut down. Now, these are still rough-ended, so they are just straight cut. However, you'll notice a lot of people, they'll cut something down, and then they'll spend hours trying to repair the thread on the end so they can get a nut on. There's a way around that that saves an awful lot of grief. My dad showed me this years ago, and it works. So, here's the wheel stud. Screw on a nut. It doesn't have to be a tapered wheel nut like this, but this one is the perfect length for me to reduce the length down. Obviously, if I didn't have the perfect length there and just had an open nut, I could put a couple of washers on there. Wouldn't make any difference. Screw that nut onto the stud. Okay? Finger tight. I'm not going silly with it. And then what I'm going to do is grab the end that goes through the hub with my mole grip. So I've got a good safe hold on it. Okay? And now I'm going to cut that off with the angle grinder. And when I wind that nut back off, the thread will be recut and cleaned up as I go along. Okay? Now, there is an occasion where this won't work, but I've never found it yet. So this is just a fail-safe for me. I prefer to do it this way. As ever, got the old goggle loonies on. Got the old eye protection on. You can't see that, but hello. Okay, I've got the old eye protection on. I'm just trying to zoom so you can see where I'm cutting. I've grabbed the stud with my mole grips, all right? And I tend to rest it on my steel toe caps. However, that's not, you know, probably not the safest way of doing things. As I'm cutting, you'll notice that I'm cutting around the edge, around the perimeter there, look. I'm not just going for a straight cut through because that will allow the angle to go off, and I want to keep this as straight and as neat as possible to save hassle. So what I'm doing is I'm working around that like this till I've made a cut, and then I just nick it off, okay? So obviously you're not going to be able to hear what I'm doing now. And there you should be able to see that that's cut that off reasonably neat and tidy, okay? Can you use a hacksaw? Yes, of course you can if you want. You don't have to use an angle grinder. You don't need to use an angle grinder, but I use one quicker. You can see I've done all 16 with that nut, and although it has travelled it a tiny bit, you could still use that if you had to, okay? I get all the little bits of offcuts, drop them in a paint can. When you fill that paint can, feel how heavy it is. So now, if I unscrew that nut off, the thread is good. You can tell that the thread is good because it rotates nice and smoothly by hand. I'm not having to use tools or pliers. And when I get to the end, I can start the nut straight back on. Oops, he says try to look through the camera and 5,000 other methods. Oops, like that. Like that. Okay? Sorry, I'm trying to look through the phone. I'm trying to look through the camera. Straight on, all right? So, what I do next, let that cool for a second and get a plain nut. So, what I've got now, hoping desperately that you can see what I'm talking about. You see my ugga dugga? Yeah, there. So, what I do now is wind on a plain nut, okay? Grab it again with the mole grips. I'm not tight with those, it's just to keep a hold of, and then just run them down with my ugga dugga gun. And the only reason I'm using the ugga dugga is because that's a nylock nut, and it just happens to be what I've got in an M12. Then I'm going to take the cutting disc off, put an old sanding disc on. I tend to use these older ones quite a lot because they're not quite as aggressive. Goggles on again, just to be on the safe side. And then what I'm going to do, smooth the top just ever so gently, and then just put a slight radius on it, probably about sort of 30 degrees to the stud, like that. And we've got a nice smooth end then. And you can feel there's no burrs or overlap on that. And then just whip that nut off. Smooth as silk. And then I repeat that process for all 4. And that's that. So that's all 4 studs prepared to length. Okay. The ends are all nice and smooth now. They're not sharp and horrible. Okay, so those are now an appropriate length for the job I'm doing. Now I'm going to use the nut again. Okay, that's going to come back into play in a second. But the next part of the job is to strip off, fairly obviously, the wheel and the brakes. So I'll do that now. So first job, obviously, remove the wheels. These usually are an 11/16. People say that's 17 millimeters. It isn't. It's close to 18 actually, but these are, I think these are 17 to be honest with you, but this one's really tight. I'm just going to persuade it a little bit. Now, these shouldn't be really tight because they're only 3/8 wheel studs. As we know, they're very feeble, so very easy to break. Gosh, that really is tight. You know it's tight if the Ugga Dugga gun won't get it. Now, as a rule, I don't tend to use the Ugga Dugga on wheel nuts, especially on these small studs. There we go. However, these are going back on, so I'm not too concerned if we damage them a little bit. They're only spares for the front now. So wheel off. Now then. First caveat, okay? You need to know what your brakes are. If you fitted them yourself and you know that they're modern, non-asbestos, then you should be fine. If you're in any doubt whatsoever, wear a mask, okay? In fact, you should probably be wearing a mask anyway. Modern brake pads don't have asbestos in. Old-fashioned brake pads, you get that sort of fishy smell. It's weird, and you know it's asbestos. You only need one speck of asbestos in your lungs to cause you a very painful and awful death. So if you're in any doubt, either don't do it or wear a really good quality face mask. Now, I'm not talking about these rubbish surgery mask things. I'm on about a real mask, like the ones you use when you're painting cars and things like that. You can also damp it down. It will not take any harm just to wash that off with some water just to keep the dust contained. So first part of the task, once you've contained your asbestos or dust, is to remove the drum. Now, I brought a Phillips screwdriver because the screws on the other side, these quarter UNF countersunks, were Phillips, and on this side they're slots. That's kind of just the nature of the beast, really. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Now, sometimes these will be dog tight and you can't get them out. Luckily, these ones aren't. Now then, twice I've said now then. When you replace these screws, don't over tighten them, okay? You do not need these 2 screws to hold the drum on. The wheel holds the blooming drum on. I don't know why they put them in there, quite honestly. They're only really good when you're adjusting things, but my rule of thumb is tighten them up, then take them back so they are just cracked. This can save you an awful lot of grief when it comes. They can't fall out. They don't hold anything. They're just kind of there. If you're struggling with them, use the impact driver. When I say impact driver, I mean one of these types of impact drivers where you hit it with a hammer and it will break them loose. They're a bit old school nowadays. I've got about 6 of those, but I keep losing the bits, so I have to buy another one because they use a massive size bit. I aren't talking about the Ugga Duggas type impact. They're not really any good for this. Now then, you may, another now then, sorry. You may need to give this a tap just to center the brake shoes, and you may need to de-adjust it ever so slightly. You may not. It may just come straight off. This one feels like it needs a little tap. Giving them a tap, just centers the shoes because it has a sliding cylinder in there, so that just centers the shoes and allows you to get this off. Now, I may have to de-adjust this one. I didn't need to on the other side. The adjustment was spot on. Now, what this probably means on this side is that there's a big wear ridge around the back of there, and we'll have a look at that in a second. So what I'll do is I'll get my adjustment spanner and de-adjust this brake and readjust it afterwards. So there should be a tiny little adjuster under here. It's on a little taper and it's got a quarter head on it. It's a square. Sometimes you'll find they've got a nut wound on them. If you've got to use them, just adjust them ever so slightly. Just rock them like that, sorry, to free them off. They do have a habit of sticking. Whenever I have to take them to pieces or anything, I soak them particularly well in grease and oil to work it into the threads in the back, because obviously they get so little use, they rust up quite profusely. That's gone in probably about 3 turns, 3/4, so 3/4 of a turn. And that should be enough now to get that off. Now then, these are new style pads. You can see another now then, sorry about that. And you can see there's a ridge in the back, and you can see the dust also in here. There it is, there's the brake dust. There's a bit of a ridge at the back. It's actually not bad. It's just enough to stop it coming off. So just to focus in a little on the, just to focus in a little bit on the brake detail. Obviously it's a twin leading shoe, single leading shoe, sorry, rear brake with a floating piston, floating cylinder that moves fore and aft, okay, to centre the brakes. The handbrake works off here, off this lever here, which is on here. And the adjustment is here, look, you can see the little square that's on a tapered square. So as you turn that, it's very important when you adjust these that you don't leave it resting on the top of one of those tapers, which is what I think actually had happened to this. But I'll show you how to do that when I put it all back together. Now, we need to get these studs out, for which I don't need to remove the front brake pad, front brake shoe, but I will remove the back. So I'll grab my pliers or my molly old grips. In fact, I'll get the mollies, they're over here. So I'm just going to use my mole grips just to turn this washer here. This is just a keyed washer, so you push it in, put your finger on the back, stop it pushing away from you, and twist. And it will come away. Just keep hold of the spring there like that. I'm putting everything down here in order. I remember how I've placed it all. And I'm going to remove that pin. Keep that with it too. One of my wheel studs roamed away. There we go. And then using my moles again, I'm going to dismantle this brake assembly. So just rock that out of there against the spring pressure. And probably do the same on this side. Now on this side I'm having to grip the pad, so I want to be careful not to damage the pad, just to allow the spring pressure to release. And there we go. That should, technically now, with a bit of fiddly wadgely, just spring off like that. So that's all I need now to gain access to that hub. Obviously, I will have to reassemble the brakes afterwards, but that's kind of the nature of the beast. Now, to get these studs out, all I'm going to do is a nice firm tap with the hammer. Obviously, if you were going to be putting them back in, you'd have to put a nut or something over the end. But for these, big hammer, light hits, okay, and slot out thus. Now then, so what I'm going to do is show you the first one going in. So just to give you a size comparison, that's the new stud versus the old stud there. So I'm going to grab my oil can. The first part of the job, some oil on the threads. This is engine oil that I put in my oil can, but you put anything you like in. I usually just use if there's a little dribble of anything left, and then I go all the way around the edge here to allow those splines to pull in without causing any damage. Okay, it's just a motion. And I'm just going to bob that one in there, thus, same as the other one came out. And then from my bucket of nuts and bolts, I've got some nice washers. Now then, put that on there so that I know I'm going to get enough thread through the nut, because I want as much of these threads through that nut as I can. Don't use your wheel nuts for this. Use an open nut. If you need to buy one, buy one. But if you damage your wheel nut at this point, you're going to be really upset. So I'm just up to the nylock, and I can feel that's trying to twist a little further. And then grabbing my Ugga Dugga gun. Again, you don't need to use an Ugga Dugga. You can use a ratchet. This is only a little baby Ugga Dugga. What I do is just rattle them in like that. And it's stopped, so I know it's there. Release the wheel nut, and it's in. Easy as that. That pulls it in nice and square, so it's pulling it against the washers. So I know that that's gone in nice and square, and it's sat in lovely. Okay, now then, I'll give you a size comparison on the wheel nut sizes there. You can see the difference of the wheel studs compared to the originals. Okay, so if that isn't stronger, I don't know what is. So if you just watch that montage there, this is all 4 big wheel studs in now. Zoom you out a little bit. And as you can see, they've made a nice job. Okay. Correct length, nice and smooth. Now, I'm going to reassemble the brakes on this. And yesterday that involved a tiny little bit of swearing, so I won't video that for you. But to be honest, that's a different job altogether. Once the brakes are back in, the drum will go straight over those studs. The wheel stud holes will be large enough, thus, just to go straight over. The brake shoe isn't in square, but you can see they go straight over like that. And then the wheel goes back on. I'll just bob the brakes back in. I'll bob all that wheel back on, and you can just see that that's all done diddling. Easy as that. So, if you've skipped to the end, here's the conclusion. Brakes reassembled. Actually took milliseconds, so I don't know why I was crying on this on the other side, but anyway. Just put a little bit of lube around the adjusters there, just for safety. Doesn't really need it. Brake drum ready to go back on, giving it a wipe round. I've also given these a wipe with some panel wipe, just to make sure there's no grease or oil on there for quite obvious reasons. And then just slot the drum on, nice and square. Now I will adjust this once the wheel is all built back up. And now, as I stated before, I just bob these screws in. I'm not going to lie, if it was my car, I wouldn't be putting them in at all. Or I'd maybe just put one in. But obviously it's a customer's car, and they expect it to be like it left the factory. So that's tight. And then I go back about 1/8 of a turn. That will save an awful lot of grief next time any brake work needs to be done by myself or anyone else for that matter. And that's that done. So, other screw there. Crack it off a little bit. You'll so often see these tube to anything, and that's because they've been over tightened and rusted in. So the wheel drum, as you can see, goes straight on. Then the wheel goes on, just like it did before, to be honest. Boom. Now, I'm just going to run these up with the Ugga Dugga. Obviously, I don't tighten them, but I can now tighten these a lot tighter, obviously. I'm very, very canny with Ugga Dugga guns and wheel nuts and things. I was a little bit nervous of them, if I'm really honest. The other thing I will say about that is, I don't know if anybody else will agree with me or whatever, but having been stuck at the side of the road with my girlfriend's car, she broke down in Newark and had a long day in a health centre. She got a puncture and when we went, I had to rush through to help her. I rushed through to help her, and when we got there, the wheel nuts were so tight because they'd been ugga by the company that fitted the tyres the week before. I couldn't get them off. Luckily, it was about 7:30, 7:45, something like that. By the time I'd managed to get there, I'd had to leave the kids with their grandma, and then rush to a Halfords around the corner and buy a wheel brace, a torque arm and a set of impact socket. Total nightmare. So just bear in mind, if you think tighter's better, A, they'll break. The worst case scenario is you end up with a puncture at the side of the road. You grab your wheel brace out the boot to your Spitfire, it's about this long, and you can't get those bloody things off. So yeah, just bear that in mind. So there we have it, wheel fitted with super strong Freelander wheel studs. You never know. Easy as that. Thank you and good night. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and consider subscribing. Helps me out a lot. I'm still trying to work out what people like. So if you like it and subscribe to it, I know that you've got some liking for it. I might be getting it right. So cheers for that. Hope it's of use. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.